Hi, Wiltsy here. This is gonna be another video on my competitive weapon pool. This is the last current one. At some point I might change my weapon picks it just happens depending on the situation, but as of right now this will be the last of 3 that I play in competitive, it being heavy Splatling. Something a little interesting is that this was actually my first main in the game. Right now I main like Flingza and Dynamo, depending on the map and mode, and use Heavy as kind of just a long range option, but this was my main at one point. So that's just kind of interesting. Let's get into this. So first of all, what Heavy does in a team comp is it kind of does damage at long to mid range. It's got a pretty good kill time. Or it's got a really good kill time, but it's a 4-shot, so it can be a little bit inconsistent at max range if somebody's being really mobile and hard to hit. It can be a little bit hard to get 4 shots on them, but, you know, that's kind of a thing with any long-range weapon. So, well, the range, I said long range, but it's shorter range than things like Bamboozler and Jet Sculpture, Ballpoint. Definitely shorter than Hydra and Chargers. This is about here for max range without fall off. Then you add fall off in the equation, it's just like slightly longer. It's not a very big difference. The fall off can kind of help to deal with things that would normally outrange you. And it does need a charge before firing, like all other Splatlings, but while max range is tied to a full charge, you can partial charge to make it a little bit better at dealing with sort of short range threats. Unlike something like a Charger, which needs to charge up a full shot to get a kill, and tap shots are really unreliable on Chargers. So that actually makes it very versatile in what it does. So it is specifically good at that sort of mid to long range fights, but it can deal with shorter range threats much better than a lot of other long range weapons. Also has really good strafing speed. Of course I am running run speed, but that's normal to have on the weapon anyways. So that makes it good to just coming around corners or surviving fights, being harder to hit with your mobility. It does, the paint for the weapon, it paints safe and kind of splotchy, but it does paint pretty well. Not especially well, but it's also not bad, it's just kind of, it paints as well as it should. Doesn't make up for lack of paint in your comp, it doesn't hurt the paint in your comp, it just kind of paints well enough. But again, it paints safely, which helps get special and kind of help out your team if you're back here. It does not paint quickly very well though. Or like you can kind of paint a small area quickly, but it's just a little bit awkward. It's definitely not the strength of the weapon, but it's alright at it. Some of the downsides though, because if you'll notice, none of the kits for this weapon have a bomb, which normally doesn't matter too much, but one thing that does hurt is that if there's somebody right here, like where they are, you really can't deal with them without committing to the fight. You kind of have to like jump down and start shooting, which puts you at a lot of risk. So it just kind of has a hard time getting into spots in the first place. You usually need help from your teammates to do that. Since normally with other weapons you can throw a bomb there to kind of get them out of that area. You can, if it's a blaster or a slosher, you can just kind of shoot around the corner or over the wall, whatever. With Splatling you kind of have to face your opponent in order to shoot them, which is fine because it has other strengths, and you just have to keep that in mind with your team comp. That's the reason you don't normally see like 4 Splatlings on a team together. And another downside of the weapon is that, actually I talked about it a little bit, but you know, finishing people off at max range, it's not as accurate as something like a ballpoint. You can kind of see the shots have RNG. It's another aspect that makes it a little bit harder to hit people at max range. And of course, if they get behind a wall while you're shooting at them, you can get like 2 or 3 shots and then they just hide behind the wall because it took too long. But it is very good at controlling a specific area of the map. Like, if you stand here, as long as there's not somebody down here already, it's very hard for anyone to show their face unless they actually outrange you. But the weapons that outrange you are also going to be doing the same thing you do and are probably not going to just run at you. And it does have a little bit of a hard time against the weapons that do outrange it, since while its strafing speed is good, it's still pretty predictable, so chargers tend to do well against this. Ballpoint and Hydra outrange it, so they're something you have to kind of keep in mind when you're playing heavy. But it does have specials that make up for the main weapon's weaknesses it does have. So you can kind of see I have Ray on this one. Ray helps a lot to deal with things that outrange you. And just assists with your team when you're not in position to push in, whatever. And on that note, I can actually go over the various kits for the weapon. See, the vanilla is the one I personally think is the best overall in a team comp. In solo, it's kind of a different thing if you're playing casually, but in a team setting, I think the Ray variant is actually the best in most situations. Got Sprinkler, doesn't help it too much, it's kind of just you paint for special. You can use it to kind of help with a fight. Kind of awkward and situational, but you can kind of throw it down and potentially take off 1 hit, so you only need to get 3 hits, or even 2. The Sprinkler does 20 per hit, so like, if that gets in 1 hit, you only need to shoot them 3 times. If that gets in 2 hits, you only need to shoot them twice. Can be awkward to force into a fight, but it is surprisingly useful. But of course the main thing for this is the Stingray, which helps you deal with longer range threats and kind of help out your teammates from a distance with chip damage. It can be a hard special to use, so you know, maybe not worth using this if you're just not good at Ray, outside of maybe Port Mackerel where it's a bit easier to use Ray. But for the most part, you kind of have to be good at Ray to make this variant worth using. Although, one thing I will say is I don't really like playing this in solo as much, because it's kind of hard to combo Ray with teammates when you don't really trust your teammates. Like, if your teammates don't stop the enemy team from moving, it's hard to hit people with Ray. If your teammates don't do chip damage on the people you're fighting, then it's not gonna really do much with Ray. So, while it is the best in a team setting in my opinion, I don't think it's the best in a solo setting. The second variant is Heavy Deco. It has wall and bubbles, which I actually really like this variant, but it is definitely situational. Because one thing about the bubbles is that you kind of have to already be pushed up in order to make use of the bubbles. Same thing with the wall. The wall can be really useful in fights, but you kind of have to already be in position to have the wall and bubbles be useful. It doesn't really help too much with getting back in, which is of course the struggle of the main weapon. So I would mostly use this on maps where you're going to get a lot of use out of the wall and bubbles. Mostly for zones and clan blitz, because bubbles can insta-pop zone to cap it. I don't have any special power on right now, they're not as big as they usually would be, but they can insta-cap zone, or just kind of get in the way of the other team from capping zone, and then for clan blitz you kind of bubble under basket and The other team can't shoot you. Pretty basic. And the wall is actually surprisingly useful for dealing with fights. It does use up a lot of ink, so you have to use it sparingly, but it can definitely be useful, especially with a weapon with this range. Just set up a wall and shoot from safety. But like I said, it's kind of hard to make use of the bubbles as a heavy, so I mostly use this in a team setting with the right maps and modes. I definitely don't like playing this in solo, even more so than vanilla, because it doesn't have any way to quickly pop bubbles on its own to make use of insta-pop or anything like that, and teammates often will just completely waste your bubbles when you don't insta-pop them. So just kind of pop them randomly when there's nobody around, there's no reason to pop them, and it just kind of completely wastes your special. So this is the one heavy I like playing in solo the least, but I do like it in a competitive setting. And the third variant is the one that's definitely best in solo, that being Remix. It has point sensors which aren't really great. This variant would probably be the best all around if it had a better sub, but because it doesn't, that's kind of why I prefer the Ray one in general. Just slightly stronger overall when Ray is good, in my opinion. But since Ray doesn't really depend on your team or the situation very much, and Booyah is very easy, it's very adaptable. Booyah is the kind of special you can use to... You can use it to paint zone, you can use it to pressure people, you can use it to like get kills on people who are kind of put themselves in a bad position. Booyah is just a really adaptable special. And so usually I use this one in competitive if Deco or Heavy Vanilla is just not really the greatest on the map and mode. Or I'm just not going to get use out of the bubbles or the Ray. It is definitely solid though. Like all the heavy variants are good. In all of them I just use vanilla the most personally. But yeah, that's the general idea of the different heavy variants. Hopefully I didn't really miss anything major. One thing I don't think I've done a very good job talking about is why I actually enjoy playing this weapon. So I tried to work that in with my Flingza and Dynamo videos, but I don't think I did the best at that. So, you know, one of the fun things about it is just sort of, I don't know, it just kind of feels smart. You've got the charge mechanic, you don't have a recharge like you do on Ballpoint or not. Instead, you have to kind of make the most of every charge you get. I just find it fun to kind of have that limitation, but it's not a limitation that really hurts you very much, it's just kind of a fun limitation. And then you can kind of cancel your charge and start a new one. Things like that. And while personally I actually don't like the existence of Ray in this game, I think Stingray is just a poorly defined special, and you shouldn't have a special that's a infinite range death laser that can shoot through walls from anywhere on the map. I think it's just not a good design, but I will use it if it's strong, and I do actually think Stingray is fun to use. Because it feels smart, even if the design is kind of whack. It feels smart being able to get kills with Ray and get assists with Ray. And just timing Ray right and positioning Ray right, all those things. I think it's actually pretty fun. I just also kind of wish Ray didn't exist. So yeah, I'm gonna go into gear builds in a second. One thing I missed and just forgot to talk about, so I'm gonna cut this in somewhere, is like when you'd want this in a comp and when you wouldn't want a heavy in your team comp. Because while I mean, it is pretty easy to fit in a comp, I think. because again, it paints well enough for itself. But of course, if you don't have very much aggression, you're not going to be able to get your heavy back into mid very well. Same with other Splatlings or Charger or whatever. But it does kind of need a way in, which is most weapons in the game are going to be able to help it get in. It's mostly like if you're trying to run like a ballpoint, a heavy, and a Charger together, that's not a good idea. But I think most people already know that's not a good idea. And, I mean, situations you would want it are pretty much, like, compared to a Charger, it plays more aggressively, it pushes up more, which you can say the same about Ballpoint. And I'll go into the difference between this and Ballpoint in a minute, because it's actually, this and Ballpoint are the easiest to compare. But with Chargers, of course, both this and Ballpoint will play more aggressively, while also being a little bit less good at sort of max range stuff and being able to control an area. So of course, Chargers can just one-shot from halfway across the map. But Heavy has the mobility and the partial charge stuff and whatnot to make it much better at pushing up. Though it does also need help pushing up because it doesn't have any way to clear out an area if it's not already there. And then comparing this to Ballpoint, it's like Ballpoint's better at shooting, painting quickly. One of the things you've seen me talk about is safe painting versus quick painting. Whereas this is really good at safe painting, and Ballpoint is really good at quick painting. The short range mode paints extremely well. It's one of the best painting weapons in the game as far as short, quick painting. But Ballpoint's long range mode doesn't paint very well. So that's one difference. Of course, Ballpoint has longer range, but the damage output is slower. So this weapon's a bit better at getting kills at max range, though it doesn't have as much range, which gives it this interesting trade-off. Honestly, I think Ballpoint versus Heavy, it pretty much just comes down to personal preference. They kind of do something similar, and they're close enough that it's more or less, I think, which you prefer. Though the one thing Heavy and Ballpoint have outside of preference is that Ballpoint has beacons, which might be really helpful for your team comp, so that's something to keep in mind. And Heavy has ray and bubble variants, which if you want a ray, if you want a bubble, then Heavy's the one that does that. But outside of those, it's pretty much just which one you prefer, in my opinion. They both have kind of their pros and cons, but it's close enough that they kind of do the same thing in a slightly different way. So back to the rest of the video, whatever. Probably gear after this. So see you there. You may have noticed in the other videos I went to Sendo.ink, but since I only have like 3 heavy builds, I might as well do it in here. So my vanilla one, I have like run speed, ink res, that's pretty normal for just strafing speed. And then a few just general utility subs and special charge to get more rays. Which I don't use it as kind of like a ray spam weapon. It's still 200 point special. It's not like you're just gonna spam rays over and over again. The special charge is more to make sure I have ray whenever I feel like I need it, because it's the kind of special you need to kind of you have at the right times. If the other team is pushing and you don't have ray, then that's probably your problem. So this special charge isn't to get more rays, it's more to always have a ray when I want one. However, for remix, I actually will often use the same build. And in this case, it is actually just get more Booyah Bombs. Since Booyah is a lot less situational, it's more like you can pretty much use a Booyah Bomb at any point in the game and it works well. It's not really stronger at certain points in time than it is at other points in time, for the most part. Though if it's like tower control, it is very helpful for kind of helping to clear a checkpoint by throwing it somewhere where the other team normally defends, but for the most part, like, I just run special charge here to get more booyahs, not to have them at the right time, like with Ray. Then a more situational build is actually a stealth jump build. The abilities are basically the same, except instead of special charge, I have stealth jump. So I mostly use that on larger tower control maps. If I played Remix more, I might play on some of the other larger maps outside of tower control, but I don't think there's really maps I'd run stealth jump on outside of tower control, since most of the time I'd probably run this on the larger maps. And I don't really want to give up the special charge for the Ray variant, personally. So I just use stealth jump on Remix, because it's the one that's the least gear dependent in my opinion, since you don't really need any gear specifically for the sub and special. Then for Deco, I actually run this, which gives up a little bit of run speed, gives up a little ink res, and gives up the bond defense in exchange for object shredder and special power for the bubbles. And that gives you bigger bubbles and helps to shred the bubbles, which is kind of a understandable trade-off. Like, the lost abilities don't hurt it too much. It's kind of annoying not having them, but it's pretty minor in the grand scheme of things. And definitely worth giving up for the bubbles. I also, something I didn't really say is, I think Heavy Deco is actually the most fun to play with, just making use out of the wall and bubbles. I don't know, just something about a Heavy that can kind of, it kind of has Brilla tanky kind of qualities to it. You have the wall and you have the bubbles to keep you alive. It's harder to get in the first place, even compared to the other weapons, but once you're in, it's kind of like the intent of Heavies. Because you've got two things that just specifically keep you alive while you take fights, and then it also has range on top of that. I think once Heavy Deco is in position, it can be really strong. It's like I can hide in my bubbles and just pop out with a full charge, and then just hide back in my bubbles while charging. And I can also just pop the bubbles on my own, whatever. Yeah, Heavy Deco is definitely not used very much, but I kind of want to see it used more, because it's definitely a strong weapon. It's just weird. And it's not very good in solo, because your teammates are gonna completely waste your bubbles. If you try to do the thing I was doing there, where I'm hiding in my bubbles to charge, it's not gonna work, because your teammates in solo will just sort of pop your bubbles while you're charging and get you killed. And it sucks. But if you actually have teammates you can trust and rely on to not pop your bubbles randomly at bad times, it's really strong. So that's gonna be Heavy. You can probably also see that Vanilla, or technically Hero Splatling, is my most played weapon in the game, because this was my main for a long time. But yeah. See you in a bit. Whenever I do my next video, which will not be in this format, because I'm done with these videos for a while. So yeah, bye.